Oh God, that night the sea called my name. Malik Rivers could still remember that moment vividly, the moment that tore apart the peaceful life he once had. In the darkness of Seabreeze Harbor, the moonlight laid a silver sheen across the waves, and from the depths of the ocean came a woman's voice, warm yet chilling. Malik, it's time. Not just anyone. It was him. In that very instant, Malik felt a trembling deep in every fiber of his being, as if the entire sea was waiting for him to step in. But no one knew that this call would drag him into a hunt soaked in sweat, tears, and blood. Once you've heard it, there is no turning back. And the same goes for you if you keep listening. You will never see the sea the same way again. The night sea of Seabreeze seemed to carry a secret that day. The sky was as clear as glass, a gentle breeze just enough to stir the old mooring ropes, and the harbor lay in an unusual stillness, broken only by the rhythmic lapping of waves against the hulls. Malik Rivers, a 19-year-old boy accustomed to the scent of salt and fish oil, was leisurely casting his nets, just like any other night. Under the moonlight, the water shimmered like a sheet of silver silk stretching all the way to the horizon. Since childhood, Malik had heard stories about the golden-scaled mermaid passed down from the lips of the elders sitting on the steps of the corner cafe, from the strum of a street guitar to the beat of a djembe drum during village ceremonies. But to Malik, they had always been nothing more than enchanting lullabies meant to coax children to sleep. He believed in summer sardines, in the rising waves that signaled a coming storm, but not in any mermaid. Then, a strange glimmer flashed beneath the side of the boat. At first, Malik thought it was just the reflection of the moon or the distant lights of a cargo ship offshore. But this light did not stay still. It moved, swaying like a dance, sometimes stretching near the surface, sometimes diving deep, leaving behind rippling golden circles that trembled in his eyes. Malik braced himself against the side of the boat, leaning down, the icy chill of the sea breeze making him shiver. When his gaze finally caught up with the movement, a figure emerged, faint, yet distinct. Long hair drifting like dark clouds, and golden scales on a tail reflecting the moonlight like thousands of tiny lanterns. The sight was breathtaking, like a quiet yet haunting jazz melody. Then, in a moment where the entire world seemed to stop, Malik heard a voice. It wasn't calling from afar, it seeped directly into his mind. A woman's voice, deep and warm, yet weighted as though it carried the burden of the entire ocean. Malik, the 3 treasures must be found before it's too late. He froze, heart pounding wildly, his hands instinctively tightening around the net's rope. The water still rippled softly, but the golden light began to fade, then vanished completely, leaving behind a deep, impenetrable darkness. Malik's eyes darted around, searching for another sign, but there was only the sound of the waves and the briny scent of fish. From that moment, his familiar peace was gone. Every sound along the harbor seemed to echo with new meaning. The clanging of the mooring ropes like an urgent drumbeat, the soft whistle of the wind like whispers of something he couldn't yet understand. He wondered why his name, why tonight, and more importantly, what were the 3 treasures? Those questions followed Malik even as he hauled in his nets. His hands performed the same routine as always, but his mind drifted back to the image of dark hair, deep eyes, and brilliant golden scales. The night at Seabreeze carried on, but for Malik, it had closed one chapter and opened another. When the boat docked, Uncle Elijah was still fast asleep in the small cabin, unaware that out there the sea had chosen to call his nephew's name. Malik lingered a moment longer on the wooden pier, staring out at the still water where the golden light had vanished, as if it had never existed. But he knew, and he felt it in his bones, that the moment had marked something irreversible. In Seabreeze, people often said, "When the sea calls, you cannot help but answer." Malik didn't yet understand the full meaning of that saying, but deep in his heart, he knew he had just received an invitation from the deepest, most dangerous, and perhaps most beautiful place. And if you think you would walk away right now, ask yourself, do you have the courage to not know what happens next? Before we continue, let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing viewers from all over gather here, or just comment one if you're intrigued and want to hear the rest of the story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me where you're watching this video from. Dawn in sea breeze rose slowly, the first rays slipping through the clouds, gilding the small waves. Malik had barely slept all night. The image of the golden light and the mysterious voice kept spinning in his mind like the pounding drums of a festival that continued long after the crowd had dispersed. He knew the answer wasn't at the harbor or in the narrow streets, but in the place the elders had always warned about, Moonlight Cave. Since childhood, Malik had heard many stories about that place. Some swore they had seen figures vanish right at its entrance. Others claimed to have heard singing from within, drawing them closer until the water rose to their necks. Elijah had once sternly forbidden him from setting foot there, calling it the gateway of the sea. But the more forbidden it was, the greater the curiosity. And today, it was no longer just curiosity, it was an urge. Malik followed the gravel path leading to the deserted beach south of town. Waves crashed against the rocky outcrops, spraying white foam. Not a soul in sight. Moonlight Cave lay hidden beneath a high cliff, its entrance dark as the gaping mouth of a massive creature, waiting to swallow anyone who dared step in. He stepped onto the sand, his shoes growing damp as the waves rolled in. The air outside already carried the tang of salt, but as he neared the cave, the scent grew more concentrated, mingled with the musty odor of seaweed and damp stone. The sound of the open sea shifted into a deep, resonant echo, like fragments of ancient speech broken and left behind in the space. The darkness inside swallowed the light. Malik touched the stone wall, feeling its cold dampness. Beneath his feet, droplets from the cave ceiling fell one by one, each splash ringing out like the ticking of a countdown clock. And then he saw it deep within. A faint, warm glow spread outward. It wasn't as bright as moonlight, nor flickering like street lamps, but gentle and inviting. Malik moved toward it, each step stretching as though pulled by something beyond reason. Before him, atop a flat rock, sat an enormous spiral seashell. Its surface was ivory-colored, but the grooves of the spiral glowed with a pale golden hue, like hundreds of fireflies at rest. Malik stood still, his heartbeat slowing, every sound around him receding into the distance. He reached out, his fingers just inches from the cool surface, when a sound broke out behind him, the heavy, wet steps of someone approaching. Malik turned. From the darkness, a figure emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, eyes glinting like a predator's in weight. It was Reggie Shark Thompson, a name the harbor folk only whispered for fear of trouble. He had once been banished from Seabreeze for smuggling rare seafood and entanglement in shady dealings as far as New Orleans. Now he stood there, one hand braced against the cave wall, a tilted smirk full of mockery on his face. His voice was deep and dry. "You know, kid, this thing is worth more than your life." The words didn't need to be loud, they sank like a stone into water, dropping deep into Malik's mind. In that moment, Malik understood he was no longer the only one who knew about the golden light or the mysterious call. He also understood that whoever laid hands on this shell would hold something both man and sea desired to possess. His body reacted before his mind could calculate. Malik lunged forward, clutching the shell to his chest. The rock was cold and slippery, but he held it tight. Reggie moved in, quick as a wave's sweep. Malik spun, spotting a narrow gap along the cave wall, a passage leading out the back. He slipped through, his shoulder scraping hard against the stone, pain shooting through him, but he never loosened his grip on the shell. The footsteps and the slap of water followed close behind. Malik burst toward the light of the open sea, the rush of wind hitting his face. When his feet met the sand again, he ran straight toward town, the waves crashing behind him like an urgent push. Only when he stopped in the middle of Sea Breeze's brick-paved street did he realize how fiercely his heart was pounding. The shell was still in his arms, cool yet heavy, as if carrying the weight of the unknown. Malik didn't know that the moment he left Moonlight Cave, something had changed in the sea, and in himself. From now on, every step he took would lead him to places that had once existed only in the whispers of the waves. Malik left the beach with his breath still ragged, his steps heavy, yet his heart felt as though something was pulling him in one unwavering direction. The giant seashell in his arms was not merely an odd object. It felt alive, with a subtle pulse, sending a chill through his skin. He knew he couldn't take it home. There was only one place in town safe enough and wise enough to understand what others would dismiss as made-up stories. Mama June's wooden house. Mama June lived at the end of the red brick road, her house draped in purple bougainvillea, the faint scent of herbs drifting from its always open windows. In the eyes of Sea Breeze's people, she was both healer and keeper of ancient tales, guarding them like treasures. Every beat of the djembe drum from her yard had once led generations into the sea's festivals and had also seen off the spirits departing this world. As Malik stepped through her gate, it felt like leaving the real world and entering a space where time slowed. Inside, golden candlelight reflected off rows of glass jars filled with herbs, seashells, and sea stones. In the center of the room sat a large djembe drum draped with floral cloth, waiting for her hands to strike. She looked up when she saw Malik. Mama June's eyes seemed to have already read him before he could even exhale a greeting. When Malik set the seashell on the table, she didn't touch it immediately, only tilted her head slightly, as if listening to a sound only she could hear. The air in the room thickened, as though even the dust motes had stopped drifting, waiting for her to speak. Slowly, she poured a cup of herbal tea, the scent of ginger and mint intertwining, handed it to Malik, and then sat across from him. Her voice rose low and steady, like the distant drumbeat from the ocean's depths. This is the shell of the wind. It is one of the 3 treasures of the ocean, along with the tide pearl necklace and the staff of the underwave. These 3 treasures command the breath of the sea, the heartbeat of the waves, and the path of the tides. She ran her fingers lightly along the spiral ridges of the shell, as if reading a book with no words. If it falls into greedy hands, the sea will grow wrathful. It will not only swallow ships, it will swallow the shore. Malik sat frozen. Her words painted a terrifying vision. Waves as tall as buildings, the town wiped from the map, the sea roaring like a beast freed from its chains. She looked at him, her eyes deep as the nighttime waters. The voice you heard last night was Seraphine. The golden-scaled mermaid does not reveal herself to just anyone. She chose you, Malik. That means you have stepped into a story you cannot step out of. She rose, walked to a wooden shelf, and took down a small box carved with waves and dolphins. Opening it, she pulled out a piece of aged leather. On it was a map, unlike any ordinary nautical chart. The lines curved like flowing water, 3 golden points marked in a triangle. This shell is the first key, she said. The other 2 treasures have been lost for centuries. But believe me, Malik, Reggie is not the only one hunting for them. There are other forces older, darker, and they will not stop until the sea belongs to them. He looked down at his hands, still clutching the shell's edge. It was no longer cold, but warm now, beating in rhythm with his own heart. Malik did not know if it was a blessing or a curse. Outside, the sea wind began to rise, the sound of wooden shutters banging against the wall. Mama June placed her aged yet steady hand on his shoulder. You have a choice, Malik. Step into this journey, or wait for the day the sea comes to your shore. Malik said nothing, but deep in his mind, the image of last night's golden light and the mermaid's deep eyes had already made the decision for him. In Seabreeze, there are stories told only by word of mouth, and only the chosen ever hear the rest. Malik had just become part of one of those stories. And if you've listened this far, do you dare follow him into the deepest part of this legend? Rumors in Seabreeze traveled faster than the sea wind. In just one night, the story of a young man carrying a giant glowing seashell had threaded its way through every cafe, every street corner, and even onto the decks of the cargo ships docking at the port. Some claimed it was a sign of good luck for the coming fishing season, while others warned it was an omen of a great storm. But everyone agreed on one thing. Malik Rivers had stepped into waters no one in this town dared to touch. And in the midst of that murmur, one person listened with particular interest: Aaliyah Carter. The mayor's daughter and the head of the harbor guard, Aaliyah, was known not only for her striking, powerful beauty, but also for her intellect and courage. The people of Seabreeze still remembered the day Hurricane Katrina struck, when many sought shelter. She had led the rescue team wading through flooded streets, pulling people one by one into safety boats. Since then, they had called her the Queen of the Harbor, not for a crown, but for a heart of steel and hands always ready to grasp another's. That afternoon, as Malik sat on the wooden pier gazing out at the sea, listening to the waves knock against the pilings like a distant drumbeat, Aaliyah appeared. She walked toward him, her shadow stretching across the planks, her eyes fixed on him without blinking. Without much preamble, Aaliyah already knew what Malik was holding and, more importantly, what it could mean. Her voice was steady, yet low and slow, as if she wanted each word to drop and anchor itself in the listener's mind. She told him that her father, a seasoned captain, had once seen Seraphine in his youth. Not in a dream, not from secondhand tales, but with his own eyes that had steered ships through countless storm seasons. He believed the golden-scaled mermaid was real and that the story of the three treasures of the ocean was no mere legend. Aaliyah laid out an unavoidable truth. If Malik kept the shell on his own, he would become a target. Not only was Reggie Shark tracking him, but there were other forces, ones that cared nothing for the fate of this town, only for harnessing the sea's power to serve their own ends. And when the sea grew angry, Seabreeze would be just one of countless names erased from the map. She gave him a clear proposal: partnership. Malik held the first key, while she had the crew, the ship, and the ability to navigate places no ordinary map dared to mark. Together, they could find the other two treasures before someone else did. Malik listened in silence, the offshore breeze carrying the scent of salt and the warmth of the setting Sunday. Mama June's words still echoed in his mind: "You have a choice." But here, standing before Aaliyah, that choice seemed to lean on its own toward one side. It wasn't just logic that working together would be safer. It was also because of Aaliyah's eyes. They weren't the eyes of someone merely curious or hungry for power. They were the eyes of someone who had lost before, who had fought, and who was willing to begin again to protect what remained. In those eyes, Malik saw a flame the sea could not extinguish. Finally, he nodded. A small gesture, but one enough to change everything. Aaliyah did not smile. She simply nodded back, like two sailors who had silently agreed to board the same ship, knowing it would sail through storms. Far offshore, the sun sank lower, staining the water red, while seagulls traced circles in the sky. Beneath the waves, somewhere, perhaps Seraphine was watching, waiting to see the next step of the one she had chosen. They didn't yet know that at that very moment, somewhere else, Reggie had just received new information on the location of the second treasure, and the real race had just begun. My dear viewers, stay tuned for the next part that will leave you in awe. Take a second to like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment below to tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see people joining us from all around the world. The night sea before their departure was unnervingly quiet, as if it were taking a deep breath before a furious symphony. Malik stood on the deck of the small boat, his fingers lightly brushing the surface of the shell of the wind he carried in a cloth pouch. Beside him, Aaliyah checked the mooring ropes and diving gear, her eyes fixed on the dark horizon. They were not alone. 2 seasoned sailors were with them. Old Lewis, skin-tanned by the sun, his arm inked with a map of the seas, and Marcus, a man who had survived a shipwreck in the Bermuda Triangle. Their destination was the Mist Trench, a deep-sea chasm off the coast of Charleston. It was said that on full moon nights, the sea fog there grew so thick it could hide even the largest waves. And beneath lay a swirling current that dragged everything down into the depths. It was there, according to Mama June, that the tide pearl necklace was kept the second treasure, with the power to command the ocean's rise and fall. The journey began under a veil of tension. The wind was gentle at first, but the farther they sailed, the sharper it became, like icy blades slicing across their skin. The seawater gradually shifted in color, from deep blue to silvery gray, signaling unfamiliar waters. Malik could feel a murmuring from within the sea, not from the waves, but from something older, like the breath of the abyss waiting for them. When the first curtain of white fog appeared, dark shapes began circling the boat. Marcus looked down, his eyes flashing with wariness. Great white sharks, not just one, but a whole pack. They moved in rings, as if they knew exactly where the boat was headed. Lewis gripped the wheel tight, keeping the boat steady, but Malik could feel the pressure of the water increasing, as though a giant hand were pulling them downward. Then, the fog parted in a sudden clearing, and from that darkness, Seraphine appeared. The golden-scaled mermaid was no drifting mirage, she was real, her radiant scales catching the faint moonlight on the sea's surface. Her hair flowed in the water, and her deep eyes seemed to hold the answers to every question yet to be asked. She didn't speak, only gestured. Malik understood. He donned his diving suit, secured the oxygen tank, tightened the rope around his waist, and plunged into the water, following the golden light she led through the foggy depths. The water was freezing, the pressure building with each meter, but her light cut through the murk like the only path through the night. When they reached the trench floor, Malik saw it the tide pearl necklace, suspended within a coral arch, glowing with a gentle blue like the ocean's own breath. But as he drew closer, the water around him began to tremble, and a voice echoed from every direction, not Seraphine's, but the voice of the trial. The water turned into a mirror, reflecting not his current self, but the memories he had buried deep. The sight of his parents being swept away in a storm when he was a child. The screams swallowed by wind and waves. The helplessness of a boy who could only watch. Each vision tore open wounds that had never healed. The pressure in Malik's chest grew not just from the water, but from his own heart. He wanted to turn away, but Seraphine was still there, her gaze reminding him that this was not something he could avoid. To claim the power of the sea, he first had to face the pain within himself. Malik closed his eyes, letting the memories flood back, letting the salt water mix with saltier tears. When he opened them again, the images in the water faded, leaving only his reflection, not the frightened boy, but a man ready to go on. He reached out and touched the pearls. The moment they met his skin, a warm current surged through him, driving out the cold of the deep. The necklace felt soft, yet heavy, as though carrying a fragment of the ocean's soul. Seraphine nodded, then turned and guided him back to the surface. When Malik broke through into the open air, Aaliyah and the 2 sailors were waiting. The fog had thinned, the sharks gone as if they had never been there. Malik gripped the tide pearl necklace tightly in his hand, knowing the journey had only just begun, and from now on, the waves would be both his ally and his trial. On the way back to Seabreeze, the small boat skimmed across the water like a weary arrow, slicing through the last veil of fog from the mist trench. Malik stood at the bow, his hand clutching the tide pearl necklace, feeling each warm pulse seep into his skin. In that gentle blue glow, he thought he could hear the ocean's sigh, a sound both comforting and foreboding, as if warning of storms yet to come. Beside him, Aaliyah silently watched the horizon, her eyes reflecting the deep shade of the water, knowing that with every nautical mile closer to shore came rumors and greedy eyes waiting. By the time dusk fell, Seabreeze emerged, its low wooden houses peeking through the rows of palms. Firelight spilled from open windows, the scent of grilled fish mingling with the sea breeze, evoking the safety of home. But on the pier, a figure stood motionless, waiting. A long sea blue dress clung to her tall, slender frame, black curls spilling over her shoulders, catching the amber of the setting sun in faint halos. She was Cassandra Vale, a name that lived only in half-true, half-mythic sailors' tales about the waters off the Bahamas. They said she had once lulled the tides to sleep with her voice, bending the waves to clear a path for ships through storms. But they also whispered of a fateful night when a fishing village vanished after a single song from her lips. That story left Cassandra both revered and cursed, until she was driven from her homeland like one exiled by the sea itself. When Malik's boat docked, Cassandra stepped forward, moving with the grace of someone walking on water, not wood. Her smile carried the softness of rippling waves, yet in her eyes ran currents impossible to read. She needed no words, her presence alone thickened the air on the pier. From a distance, Mama June stood on her porch, watching with the faintest frown, as if she could smell the salt of an oncoming storm in the wind. In the days that followed, Cassandra settled into Seabreeze's inner circle with unnerving ease. She appeared at every meeting about the search for the treasures, her voice as gentle as early rain, offering advice so precise and reasonable it was hard to refute. Malik kept his guard up, but Cassandra's pull was like an undertow, slow, quiet, yet capable of drawing a small boat of willpower far from shore. Aaliyah made no attempt to hide her suspicion, her gaze tracking Cassandra's every move like a hunter following prey. But without proof, suspicion was only a shadow, not yet a storm. Then the night came. No moon, no stars, the sea beyond the harbor was as black as a shroud. Malik sat alone in his rented room, the dim gold of a lantern casting light on the shell of the wind and the tide pearl necklace resting on the table. Outside, the soft wind rattled the window frame like an anxious heartbeat. The door swung open. Cassandra entered, carrying the scent of salt and the chill of the night sea. The light fell across her face, turning her eyes into deep, still pools. She moved closer, her hand brushing the table's edge. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, there was sound, a low hum, resonant, rising, like a song buried beneath hundreds of meters of water. Malik felt the air in the room thicken, each breath heavy as if pressed down by waves. The world blurred, colors drained away, leaving only the song curling through his mind, lulling every defense to sleep. A single heartbeat later, his knees touched the floor. His eyelids sank, his hand loosened. As darkness closed in, he vaguely sensed Cassandra leaning forward, her hands gathering both the shell and the pearls. A drop of salt water fell on his cheek, whether from the sea or from someone else, he couldn't tell. When Aaliyah burst in, the room was empty. The window was wide open, the curtains soaked through, and far offshore, a small boat vanished into the night. On deck, Cassandra stood beside Reggie Shark Thompson, who smiled coldly like a blade that had just cut into a wave. Malik awoke with the taste of salt on his lips and the crushing absence in his hands. Aaliyah's anger rose like a surging tide, but before it could find words, Mama June appeared in the doorway. Her eyes did not look at what was missing, but straight toward the sea, where darkness was swallowing the horizon. Her voice was low, steady, without a trace of surprise. The real enemy has yet to show their face. Cassandra is only the small wave before the storm. And if you think a small wave was dangerous, are you ready to stare straight into the storm? The first drops of rain pounded against the deck like drums signaling the start of a hunt. Aaliyah gripped the wheel tight, their boat slicing into the pitch-black night, lightning flashing overhead in jagged bursts that briefly revealed Reggie's vessel somewhere ahead. Malik stood at the bow, the wind lashing his face, the salt of the sea mixing with the bitterness that still burned after losing the treasure. In his hand, the shell of the wind trembled faintly, as if it could sense the scent of betrayal. The night sea was nothing like the day. It was not blue, not gentle, it was a black expanse, filled with 1,000 blade-like waves waiting for the chance to overturn everything. Thunder cracked, its echo sinking into the ocean's belly, reverberating back into the chests of those daring enough to sail at such an hour. Each time the sky lit up, they caught a glimpse of Reggie's ship slipping between the sheets of rain, like a phantom changing course to stay just out of reach. Mama June's clue had steered them toward Stormbreak Island, a place legend claimed hid the staff of the Underwave in a flooded temple that only revealed itself when the storm reached its peak. Malik knew. If Reggie and Cassandra reached it first, not only Seabreeze but the entire eastern seaboard would be in their hands. Marcus and Lewis worked without pause, their oars slapping hard into the water as the wind slammed into their backs. The waves rose like walls, the boat tilting violently, water spilling over the deck, yet Aaliyah held their course. Malik strained his eyes, every muscle on edge as the distance between the two ships began to shrink. A longer, brighter bolt of lightning lit the enemy deck in full. Reggie at the helm, a gaff hook in his hand, his gaze cutting through the rain like a shark seeking prey. Beside him, Cassandra stood tall, her wet hair plastered to her face, her smile delicate but her eyes colder than the sea. When the two vessels drew nearly parallel, the ocean conspired to turn the gap between them into a narrow battlefield. Malik and Marcus swung their grappling hooks, locking the hulls together. The jolt made the timbers shudder, waves crashing over the decks as if to drag both fighters and weapons into the deep. The battle began without a war cry, only the thud of wood, the scrape of steel, and the sharp breaths between sheets of rain. Malik vaulted onto the enemy deck, his hands gripping a slick rope, his boots hitting the cold planks with a hard thud. Reggie swung his gaff to block, the impact forcing Malik back a step, but Malik's eyes locked not on Reggie's weapon, but on the small wooden chest lashed down behind him. In that instant, Malik knew. It wasn't the final treasure, but it was the map that led to it. Aaliyah was aboard too, her hair whipping across her face, her eyes like blades. She sidestepped a lunge from one of Reggie's men, then spun, using the paddle's shaft to knock him out of her path. On the slick deck, every step could have been the last, yet no one faltered. Lightning burst again, freezing their struggle into stark black silhouettes framed in white. A sudden violent heave tore the ships apart. Malik clung to a rope but couldn't advance. In a heartbeat, Reggie yanked his ship's grapples free, pulling quickly out of range. Cassandra, untouched by the chaos, turned to look back at Malik. Her smile wasn't one of complete victory, it was a message. The game has only just begun. They lost sight of the ship as the thick rain swallowed the horizon. The crash of waves against the hull became the only heartbeat left, darkness wrapping itself once more over the sea. Malik's grip tightened around the shell of the wind, the cold seeping between his fingers. Aaliyah stood beside him, her breath heavy, but her gaze refusing to accept defeat. Ahead lay only the sea and a storm that had yet to crest. But they knew for certain, Reggie and Cassandra had already set foot on Stormbreak, and with every passing second, they drew closer to the staff of the Underwave. The sea lay strangely still as Malik and Aaliyah entered Stormbreak Bay. After the storm, the water was as flat as glass, but beneath it was another world deep, dark, and waiting. Jagged walls of dark coral rose like fortress ramparts, leaving only a narrow passageway leading down into the blue-green gloom. This was the entrance to the underwater temple. Malik drew in a deep breath, the chill of the ocean filling his lungs. The shell of the wind and the tide pearl necklace were strapped to him, their heartbeats in sync with his own. Aaliyah gave a slight nod, her eyes resolute, and together they dove. The light from the surface faded quickly, giving way to an otherworldly pale glow from clusters of bioluminescent coral. The underwater temple revealed itself like a forgotten city, Stone pillars carved with mermaids and curling waves, domes draped with seaweed flowing like hair in the current. On the walls, Malik recognized reliefs depicting the story Mama June had once told. Seraphine had given the treasures to humans not to rule the sea, but to remind them to live in harmony with it. At the temple's center rose a massive coral outcrop, cradling the staff of the underwave. The staff's shaft was etched with spirals like whirlpools, its head set with a deep green gem that pulsed gently, as if breathing. Its light made the surrounding water shimmer, as though holding thousands of tiny stars. Malik had barely started toward it when a dark shape surged forward. Reggie, eyes sharp and cold, powering through the water toward the coral. Currents coiled around him, forcing Malik back. Instinct kicked in, Malik lunged to block his path. Their bodies collided under the weight of the water, Reggie's shove like a wave striking rock, but Malik held on. They spun between the coral columns, the staff's green light scattering across the white foam of their struggle. Then a violent surge slammed through the temple, shaking its very foundation. Cassandra appeared at the edge of the chamber, her eyes half-lidded as if in a dream, her arms sweeping graceful arcs. From her fingertips, waves spiraled into rings, rushing forward to engulf Malik. The current hurled him downward, the temple above blurring, his chest tightening with the strain for air. In that moment, a figure emerged. Black hair coiled and floating, golden scales blazing like a galaxy beneath the sea. Seraphine. She reached out, and with a single touch, a flood of air filled Malik's lungs, as if he had drunk the breath of the entire ocean. Her voice rang in his mind, bypassing his ears. Only one the sea accepts may touch the staff. Malik opened his eyes, feeling the water around him, listening. He pushed upward, slipping past Cassandra's spirals, past Reggie straining to tear the staff free but failing. When Malik's hand closed around the shaft, a surge of green light burst forth, rippling across the temple like a tidal wave of radiance. The coral cracked, releasing the staff of the underwave. As it came free, Malik felt a force pour into him, merging with the life of the shell of the wind and the tide pearl necklace. The three treasures united, the temple's waters swirling in a vortex that lifted him to the center of the dome as though the sea itself was recognizing its new keeper. Reggie recoiled, shielding his eyes from the glare. Cassandra faltered, her rings of water dissolving. The light danced over the carvings, bringing to life the images of mermaids smiling from within the stone. When the glow subsided, Malik gripped the staff, feeling the sea's power flow through him like thousands of small waves. But he knew this power was not to be claimed, but to be guarded. And that meant the real battle had only just begun. Do you think you can guess what happens next? Take a moment, relax, and comment 1 or "I'm still here" to continue listening. The green light from the staff of the underwave still wrapped around Malik like unending tides. The water in the underwater temple was so still he could hear his own heartbeat. But the moment didn't last. Out of the darkness at the temple's edge, Reggie and Cassandra surfaced again. Their faces were etched with desperation laced with ambition, like those who had glimpsed paradise only to be shoved away before they could touch it. Cassandra raised her hands, her voice rising in the water, this time no longer soothing, but sharp as a blade, each high note drilling into the ear like the summons of a furious sea. Columns of water rose, curling around Malik and Aaliyah, pressing them into a spinning vortex. Reggie lunged, gaff hook in hand, like a steel claw ready to tear through anything in his way. Malik felt the power in the staff surging, pulsing in rhythm with the two other treasures. He closed his eyes, letting his breath merge with the current, and when he opened them again, his gaze shone like waves under a full moon. A new vortex formed, this one not obeying Cassandra's song, but bending to the will of the staff of the underwave. The water dragged Reggie and Cassandra back, coiling around them like a massive serpent made of waves. Malik twisted the staff, and the vortex transformed into a colossal wave, lifting them both off the temple floor. The force of the water drowned all other sounds, leaving only the roar of the ocean. The waves surged past coral columns, tore through the seaweed-draped dome, and exploded to the surface with the strength of the entire ocean. When it broke, Reggie and Cassandra lay motionless on Stormbreak's rocky shore, no longer fierce or alluring, but two exhausted humans stripped of the power they had tried to claim. Malik and Aaliyah returned to the temple's heart. Seraphine appeared, the light from her golden scales casting 1,000 festival lanterns across the stone walls. She glided forward, laying a hand gently on the staff, her eyes proud yet warm. She spoke no words, but Malik understood this was the moment to return the power. He offered her all three treasures, the shell of the wind, the tide pearl necklace, and the staff of the underwave. Seraphine gathered them to her chest, then turned toward the deep. A wide beam of light spread outward, opening a clear portal into the pitch-black depths, the deep kingdom. Light streamed downward with her, and then all closed again as if it had never been. The sea returned to its steady, peaceful rhythm, but in its depths, the three treasures were sealed away, waiting for the day they would be needed again. Back in Seabreeze, the waves lapped against the docks like hands clapping in joy. Within weeks, fishing boats returned with full holds. Coral reefs offshore bloomed with color again, and the unseasonal storms vanished as if they had been nothing more than a shared nightmare. The townsfolk held a sea Thanksgiving unlike any before. Djembe drums echoed through the streets, the scent of grilled seafood drifted on the breeze, and children ran laughing, wearing garlands made of seashells and seaweed. Malik stood on the familiar wooden pier where years ago he had stared out at the horizon alone. This time Aaliyah stood beside him, her eyes fixed on the same point. Neither spoke, but both knew the journey had bound them as companions not just on the sea but in the quiet days to come. As the sun set, the water turned red as fire, and Malik felt a gentle wave brush against the pier's supports. Far off, the golden shimmer of Seraphine's form flickered, her black hair floating like coiled silk in the current. She didn't come closer, only smiled before vanishing into the depths. Malik knew the sea would always be watching, and that one day, the ocean's call might sound again. If you were Malik after restoring peace, could you truly forget that call, or would you always be ready to set sail once more? Night in Seabreeze carried an unusual kind of stillness. No wind whistling past rooftops, no waves slamming against hulls as in the days of storms, only the warmth of the earth and the salt of the sea drifting in. Malik stood alone on the wooden pier, the same spot that had watched him grow from an orphaned boy into the keeper of peace for the entire town. The water before him mirrored the moon like a vast sheet of glass, so smooth that even the smallest movement would be laid bare. A light breeze passed, not strong, not hurried, but carrying a different kind of salt, a deeper, richer salt, as if it had traveled from a distant sea that did not belong to these waters. Malik closed his eyes, letting it touch his skin. And then, in the endless silence, the voice came. Malik. The sound came neither from the air nor entirely from the water. It seemed to pass through everything, threading straight into his mind. Seraphine's voice warm, solemn, and edged with the rising surge of far-off waves. The southern tides are awakening. The true journey is just beginning. Malik opened his eyes, and in that instant, the water before him flared with light. From the depths, a ribbon of golden radiance rose, swaying like a giant lantern beneath the night sea. The mermaid's silhouette flickered, her gaze not on him, but fixed on something far away toward the pitch-black horizon. He felt the heartbeat of the ocean align with his own, as though each small wave carried a message. The peaceful days he had thought might last forever now seemed as fragile as sea foam. The South, the name conjured visions of warm waters where the wind carried the scent of tropical forests, but also of fierce whirlpools and ancient curses that no one had yet broken. Malik knew this was no vague summons. This time, it was not for him alone. The sea was stirring, and if he did not set sail, everything Seabreeze had just regained could be swept away. Yet deep inside, he also heard a quieter question. Was he ready to trade peace for another battle? The golden light beneath the water vanished suddenly, leaving the night sea a solid black. But that strange, briny wind still lingered, like a promise that the call would return louder, stronger if he delayed. Malik left the pier, but did not go home. He walked along the shore, letting the waves lap at his feet, letting his mind replay every moment of the journey so far. The first time his name had been called across the sea at night, Seraphine's touch. The moment the staff was freed from the coral. Above, the full moon hung high, laying a silver path straight out to open water. That path was an invitation, unmistakable. Malik stopped, his eyes fixed on the south, where the darkness concealed something only the ocean knew. The night sea at Seabreeze still echoed like an old song, retelling the story of a young man who dared to step into forbidden waters, face his enemies, and ultimately return the power to where it truly belonged. Malik was no longer the boy who sat silently on the wooden pier. He had become part of the ocean's heartbeat, bound to promises yet unfulfilled. But that golden light, that call from the south, reminded him, and reminded us, that every victory is not a full stop, but a doorway to a new journey. From Malik's story, we see that true strength does not lie in holding on to power, but in knowing when to let it go for something greater than oneself. The sea grants its power to those who respect it, just as life opens paths for those who live with courage and a genuine heart. If you've ever stood before the choice between peace and challenge, what would you choose? Share your thoughts in the comments below so I'll know whether you're ready to join Malik on the voyage in part 2 or whether you'll stay behind to keep a corner of peace for yourself. Don't forget to like and share this video so that Malik and Seraphine's story can reach even more hearts. Because sometimes the call we never expect is the one that leads us to where we truly belong. Can you hear that wave?